So just want to talk for a couple of minutes about the hooks and how you might hang some of your parts for powder coating. Again, I'm very much a hobbyist. I'm working on my Jeep. There's the Jeep. And lots of different hangers and supports. We got supports, we got seat brackets, we have lift, that's a lift holder, the jack holder, and that's the charcoal canister holder. And there's tons of stuff like that. There's, you know, all the hinges for all the doors and the root tailgate and everything else. Anyway, so I just decided to get a powder coating and sandblasting at home and been very, very happy with it. I just want to talk for a little bit. I mean, you can buy hooks. So when you're hanging in your powder coating booth, again, you may have or set up a different thing. I'll just show you my situation real quickly just for reference. I took an old smoker, converted that. There's a video on that. Maybe I'll link it to this one that I made. There's a smoker. That's my powder coating oven, and this is my booth. Yes, it's cardboard, but it works fantastic. So they're relatively small enclosures, so I can't do bigger parts, but you know, 95% of what I've been doing, and I've done probably 40 or so parts now, sandblasting and powder coating, that it works great. Again, most of the stuff is like this size. This actually tends to be a little bit on the bigger side, but it fits perfectly fine. And just kind of hanging in there. So I wasn't quite sure. I watched a couple of videos, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot. You can, I mean, of course you can buy, I think I saw on Amazon, you know, $15, you can buy a dozen of these hooks, S-hooks like this. I just kind of enjoy going around the house and trying to figure out what I can use for free, what I can make shift and reuse and recycle. A lot of these are from some old chafing dishes we had, so that metal, and I just kind of bent it with some pliers. And obviously you can use coat hangers as well, things like that. One of the things I wanted to point out mainly was just the angle. So you see stuff like this a lot, or even like this. What's hard to imagine if you haven't done this before is what's going to happen in the angles. But again, you want a metal connector there so your part is grounded. But if you notice here, if you're taking a look, if you're taking one of these S hooks like this, that makes a very low angle right there. What the powder is going to do is it's going to go to the closest grounded part, and that's this part right there. You're going to get a little white non-covered area right there. So if you use this one, so I can turn this hook around, maybe that's a little bit better angle. Nope. Here, no, that's not going to work, because if you're creating a really tight angle in there, again, you can kind of see there, if this is just hanging, that little tight area right there is not going to get powder coated. Again, maybe it's not a big deal for you. It doesn't, you know, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, you can take the gun, you can put it real close, you can just kind of hammer it with some more powder, and that tends to fix some of it, but you're generally going to get, especially for a piece like this, it just happens to be angled where the weight of the support here is hanging down. So you're going to get, again, that little white area, and you can't even see it very well. I did hang it, I'm not sure which one I used, but you can't really see it here, but there's a little bit of a white area right there and right there, and certainly where it was touching right there. For the most part, it's really efficient, but if you're using a tight hook like this, you can be sure that whatever hole you're putting it in, around that hole is not going to get any powder on it. So one of the things I was playing around with in terms of the bending and the angles, I find something like this can work well. Again, it depends on the weight of what you're trying to do. So, you know, you can just take some pliers, play around with this is really thick stuff, really heavy duty. You can play around with the angle of what you're doing. So hang your piece before you shoot it, and play around with the angle of the bends for your hooks to make sure that you're not going to get any of those, I think they're called Faraday cage areas or something like that. Anyway, so just play around with what you have. But sometimes you have some weird angled stuff like this here. This I spent a couple of minutes trying to figure out, how am I going to hang it? Again, if you have something like this, this can work something like that can work reasonably well. Again, you're trying to minimize that angle, or maximize really the angle between the metal of where you're hanging it and the hook that you're using. So that could work relatively well. But again, make sure and make sure that that hook is up, that this thing isn't going to fall, because this thing does swing a little bit. And I've had situations where it's almost fallen. It looks pretty precarious, and I have to go back and rebend it and make sure that when I'm picking it up out of the booth and putting it into the oven, that it's going to be really stable. But something like this, you want to minimize angle, but you can do some different things. Like ideally for a part like this, to minimize at least that part, you might want something like that, because that's maximizing. You're going to be able to get powder all around those spots right there, and you would just need a way to hang it up from these parts right here. Of course, you have to be careful about the underneath, because the underneath is just hanging. So you're going to be shooting up, which is perfectly fine, but you just got to make sure that you can get underneath it and you can get enough power in those edges. I actually did not, and I had to put a little bit of paint and touch-up in there to fix it, because I wasn't paying attention when I should have been shooting up. But anyways, oh, you can even see in there, I had a hard time getting powder. If you look right in that edge there, you can kind of see I did not get all the way in there. And I know I shot there pretty well. It was messed around, but that is definitely good enough. You're not going to see that. It's going to be sitting up against the firewall. That's going to be perfectly fine. You know, maybe just so it doesn't rust out or anything, I might put a little primer in there with a Q-tip or a small brush or something like that, just to make sure nothing get in there. But other than that, this is pretty well coated. But again, these S-hooks, you have to be careful with the angle, whatever you're hanging. Something like this gets, you can kind of get a reasonable angle on it. You're probably going to be hanging it like that. You should be able to get in that little spot, that little area in there. Maybe it's not a big deal to you. That's perfectly fine too. I realized after the fact that the video cut out on me. I just took a standard hanger. You probably have a bunch of these in your closet. I just clipped it at both these ends here. The snippers, these things work great. And just started bending a couple of the bends. So this here, you should be able to just pinch that right in between something. That can hold a decent amount of weight. So just put that there. Let's see if that holds. Make sure it's not, can't slide. See, you just got to be careful there a little bit that it's not going to slide. In fact, you might want to, in this particular case, I might even put a little tiny bend in each of these just to make sure. It's like worst case scenario, have that thing after you've bothered to powder coat it, put the powder on and it slips off there. Anyway, that should hold real well. And again, you're not putting any angle there, and you can get and shoot right into those spots really easily. And you could reuse this too. So I might just keep that. That's going to be good. And then also just one last little thing here about the hooks and the cleaning off of the hooks, because once you use them once, they're going to look like this. And that is not going to be a good conductor for your ground. I actually just watched a video and watched somebody use this exact little anvil, and I've actually used that as well. I mean, that's kind of, powder coating is a little bit brittle, so you can just kind of give it a couple of whacks. And that starts to break it apart there. And what I usually do is I'll take my pliers and do something like this wherever I know it's going to connect. And it just strips right off there. So you take, let's see, where's my needle nose? These here. Again, you just want to make sure there's a good contact. It doesn't take much. You don't have to have a lot of surface area. Again, I mean, this tiny little thing here. So that would work perfectly fine. You can even run, sometimes I'll run that even over the wire roller just real quickly, and that'll totally clean it up and it's good for grounding. Anyway, I hope that's helpful.